Welcome to GamecockPod Live.
For the next 3 to 4 years, I'll be committed to the University of
This is Rodgers again to the 25, 20, 15, 10. Rodgers scores! Ball of Jackie Bradley Jr. delivers for the Gamecocks. Lost it up, looking for Kelly. Touchdown! Can you believe it?
And South Carolina is sending shockwaves through the SEC.
Frederick lays it in at the buzzer. That's a win! Unbelievable! I don't believe it!
And now, live from Studio 54 of the Gamecock Pod Studios, here's the Cockfather himself, Keith Alsep.
All right, everybody, welcome into Gamecock Pod Live for October the 4th, episode number 1319. We've got a great show in store for you today. I will be joined in just a few minutes with our good friend Ben Breiner from formerly Go Gamecocks in the state, now at the Big Spur.com. But first, let's get into our Nana's Porch news, notes, and headlines here on episode number 1319 of Gamecock Pod Live and Gamecock Pod Daily. All right, if you missed the news from over the weekend, Gamecock men's basketball pick up a much-needed commitment from 6'6" sharpshooter Trent Noah from Harlan, Kentucky. He is a top 150 recruit, chose the Gamecocks over Stanford, Dayton, Western Kentucky, Seton Hall, and a lot of other good programs. He had a great summer on the Adidas circuit, and his high school coach says if there's another high school player in the country that shoots it as well as Noah does, he wants to see it. And Gamecocks need a floor spacing shooter. The one knock on Noah has been, he's probably not a plus athlete, but I say there's always a place for a catch and shoot, three-point shooter and space eater. You can work with a guy once you get them in a college strength and conditioning program to improve their speed, agility, and quickness enough to make them tougher to defend. So this is the second high school commitment for the class of 24. Noah joined 6'9" Oku Federico of Finland, who's also a national top 150 recruit. Look for Lamont Paris and staff to round out the rest of this class in the spring with the transfer portal. All right, men's baseball picks up a JUCO pitcher commitment yesterday from 6'4", 190-pound left-hander Kemper Nix at Spartanburg Methodist Junior College. Pitching coach Matt Williams watched him at their pro day. His fastball hits the upper 80s on the brink of 90. He also has command of his breaking ball and a changeup. He throws all three for strikes. Gamecocks are looking for junior college pitchers. They pick up one in Kemper Nix from Spartanburg Methodist Junior College. Former Gamecock pitcher Jordan Montgomery, he pitched 7 shutout innings 5 strikeouts, no walks, scattered 6 hits in the Rangers' 4-1 win over Tampa Bay yesterday on the road in Tampa in that best of 3 series. Montgomery pitched for the Yankees. They traded him to St. Louis to try to improve their playoff position. St. Louis wound up flipping him to the Rangers, and the Rangers win game 1 largely behind the great pitching from Jordan Montgomery, 7 shutout innings. All right, The Athletic has named their top 20 impact freshman players in women's basketball. Gamecock freshman guard Malaysia Fulwiley comes in at number 3 on the list, listed as 5'10". She's definitely not 5'6". Okay, and some of these heights have not been accurate because of COVID. I don't think Raven Johnson was 5'7" or 5'8". She's closer to 5'10", 5'11", maybe even 6 foot now. Fulwiley probably 5'9", 5'10". And so I'm going to read you what they had to say about Fulwiley, but the top 2 players, one South Carolina was heavily involved with, the number 1 player in the country, Juju Watkins. No surprise, she makes the list. A 6'2", do-it-all guard from Sierra Canyon High School right there in Los Angeles. She chose to stay close to home because she was raised in Watts. There's a community park named after her grandfather. That's the legacy of her family. And look, she's going to be their best player. She was their best player the day she set foot on campus. She's going to have a phenomenal career there. She can do it all. She can score and is a threat to score every time she touches the ball. And Lindsey Gottlieb will do an outstanding job with her and get her prepared for the WNBA. And so she's number 1. The number 2 ranked player in the country, unsurprisingly, Michaela Williams, 6-foot guard out of Bossier City, Louisiana. She's ranked number 2. Chantel Jennings, who did this story for The Athletic, says she looks like a college junior physically, kind of like Ashlyn Watkins looked last year for South Carolina. She's put together. She's got a lot of talent. She won't be asked to be the go-to player, with Angel Reese back, with the additions they got out of the transfer portal, the left-handed guard from Louisville and the girl from DePaul. So she will fit in. There were also some other very good players there. But she will be a very good player. Fulwiley listed at 5'10". Jennings says Fulwiley is the definition of a Swiss Army knife on the basketball court. The guard can hit threes from NBA range, and she can dunk. I don't know about that. I'm not willing to give that tip-in dunk status. We'll see over the course of her career. As a senior, she averaged 6 assists, 6 steals per game. She's going to be a player who, in the future, will be on triple-double watch night in and night out. And she could pick out of points, rebounds, assists, or steals. It's hard to know exactly what to expect out of her freshman season at South Carolina just because the Gamecocks are a bit of a mystery going into this season. But Dawn Staley showed last season she had no fear putting the ball into a freshman point guard's hands when she turned to Raven Johnson over fifth-year senior Kara Fletcher at time. Fulwiley's impact this season will rely on how much Gamecock coaching staff can trust her. And if they do, oh boy, she'll really be fun to watch. A couple other players worth noting from that will be on the Gamecock schedule. Cadence Samuels is number 4, a 6'2" guard who is going to UConn from Bishop McNamara there in Forestville, Maryland. Hannah Hidalgo, a point guard out of New Jersey who picked Notre Dame. Aga Makara, who is the younger sister of Anna Makara at UConn. Remember the connection here. Vanderbilt's head coach was an assistant at UConn, was critical in the recruitment that Shay Ralph I'm talking about. She's got some other transfers like Jordan Oliver from Duke and a player from Tennessee. Then you've got going to Maryland, 6'7" center, Hawa Dubia out of Lady of Mount Carmel in the Bronx, New York. 6'7" player the Gamecocks could see. And Arkansas, Talia Scott, a 5'9" guard out of St. John's Country Day in Orange Park, Florida. And then coming in at number 20, a player the Gamecocks recruited but really were not sold on, Alea Del Rosario, 6'6", who moved around quite a bit. She's probably not going to play a lot this season. She's a very talented freshman. I don't know about her foot speed, her ability to be able to cover screen and rolls, how she'll be able to play at the collegiate level. I think she'll need a year of adjustment. So there's that. Gamecocks football recruiting. My good friend Phil Kornblut interviewed Atlanta Booker T. Washington defensive end Cameron Fountain, 6'6", 237 pounds, very highly rated. Gamecocks thought they were in great shape to get him. He took an early official visit to Southern Cal and committed. Now, that commitment appears to be tenuous at best. Kornblut says, since the surprise commitment, however, Fountain has sort of distanced himself from that commitment to the point to where it appears it won't be long before he's out of it. Quote, yeah, but it's like 50-50 right now. It's still a high chance that I decommit. It's Auburn and South Carolina. South Carolina's obviously been on him the longest with Sterling Lucas. With South Carolina, it's me and Coach Lucas. We don't always talk about football. We talk about what my life has going on. He said it's really about the way my brand is and the way it is with the whole coaching staff. Lucas scouted Fountain a couple of weeks ago, and Fountain said the two have been in regular communication. Quote, we've been talking every day. We've been talking about my playing style and what I should work on and stuff like that. Fountain was supposed to visit for the Mississippi State game, but was beat up and tired from his high school game the night before. He does plan to visit for a game as well as take an official visit. He also plans to set an official visit with Auburn. So this is a guy that is on flip watch. The Gamecocks continue to work four-star defensive back Jalewis Solomon, who surprisingly picked Auburn. Don't be surprised if South Carolina doesn't land one or both of these guys on National Signing Day. Fountain listed the number 48 player nationally by 24/7 Sports. ESPN ranks him the number 82 player in the country. On 3 Sports, his industry-wide ranking is number 96 and the number 8 edge rusher in the country. This is a guy, Sterling Lucas, has been recruiting for a long time. And if the NIL is there, I think the Gamecocks will be very difficult to beat for Cameron Fountain and Jalewis Solomon, quite frankly. All right, we will be right back after this commercial message, and we will be joined by Ben Breiner.
If you enjoy listening and watching the free Wednesday show, now live streaming on YouTube, and would love more Gamecock Pod daily, join our growing Gamecock family by becoming a monthly or annual subscriber. You'll be able to listen to the show every day of the week and listen to guests like J.C. Sherbert, Hale McGranahan, and John Whittle from thebigspur.com, Colin Taylor and Mike Yuva from Gamecock Central, Emily Adams from the Greenville News, Ben Portnoy, Michael Lanana, and Jeremiah Holloway from GoGamecocks.com, Michael W. Bratton, the host of That SEC podcast, and many, many more. As a VIP subscriber, you can join or listen to the weekly live Zoom call with up to 100 of your favorite Gamecocks and friends. After the show is an unrecorded overtime segment where the real scoop gets dropped and discussed. It's like going down to your local pub or sports bar and having a conversation with your Gamecock friends about last week's football game, men's and women's basketball games, and Gamecock baseball. And of course, there's always recruiting to discuss. In addition to the weekly Zoom call, VIP subscribers get the most popular podcast, The Morning After, which is released every Sunday morning during football season, and more VIP perks are in the works. Follow Keith on Twitter at KAllset, or follow the show on Twitter at GamecockPod. Go to the top of the homepage and follow the link. If all else fails, go to patreon.com/GamecockPod Daily. Join now and get up to 3 months free off an annual VIP subscription. You will love it, guaranteed. Now, back to Gamecock Pod Live.
And we go out to the West Coast to welcome in our good friend, Ben Breiner, formerly of Go Gamecocks and the State, but now at thebigspur.com. Nobody does it better breaking down the analytics and the video. Ben, how are you and how's everything going on the West Coast? You're starting to look very Ted Kaczynski-ish out there.
Yeah, it's definitely going toward Ben needs to get to the barber to get this cleaned up. But yeah, things are well. I had the experience of watching a college football Saturday on West Coast time, which is extremely disorienting. And watch that Tennessee game with its maybe 35 minutes of ups and downs before South Carolina completely lost contact.
Yeah, so, I mean, you look back on the Tennessee game and you're up 10-0. You get Tennessee goes, first of all, I didn't agree with taking the ball. I don't know why they thought that was a good idea. And so they moved the ball enough to flip the field. You get Tennessee pinned back on the 6-yard line. Perfect, Kai Kroger, right? Great start. And then Tennessee just goes 94 yards. I mean, like they were going up against the Pee Wee defense. And it's 7-0. Gamecocks go down, kick a field goal, make it 7-3. Then they get the big turnover on the DQ Smith interception. thanks primarily due to the scrambling of Spencer Rattler, they go up 10-7. And I thought the turning point was the long pass play to Squirrel White, where Nick Imamori is in perfect position to. I mean, I still don't know how he didn't knock it away, why he didn't intercept it, and how Squirrel White caught it on like the 4-yard line, laying flat on his back. It's just kind of one of those deals after that where it was just one missed opportunity after another, the fourth downs, not getting points on the fake punt, Xavier Legette slipping, stumbling, or maybe he scores a touchdown on that. And, you know, you have the horrendous pick six on 3rd and 22. And so let's just talk about the first half and just how it kind of unraveled. Take it away.
I mean, it was definitely a case of, you know, you laid out a lot of them, but we're talking missed opportunities. We're saying, you know, I don't know how good this Tennessee team is, but I know that this Tennessee team, if you give them chance after chance, they're going to be a problem. And South Carolina, you know, had those moments where you could stem the tide, had those moments when you could buttress, had those moments when you could kind of, you know, get that score that makes you feel, settles your stomach a little bit. And they just kept failing to do so. A lot of that was, and, you know, far be it from me to give credit to people, but, you know, Tennessee's tackling was better than I expected. And South Carolina's ability to make people miss tackles was worse than I expected. So you had a lot of those plays. We noted some of those third downs that were, I think Shane Beamer said they weren't run particularly correctly in terms of route depth. But, you know, if Xavier Legette catches the ball with 1 yard to go, most of the time I'm going to expect him to be able to stand up enough to fall forward to get that. But on that, you know, on a couple plays, he didn't. And even on the drive they scored a touchdown, you know, you had a little flat arrow screen to Trey Knox, and he gets his legs taken out from under him and gets knocked down at the 1. And then they false start. Like, it was just a lot of those little not being crisp enough moments and not winning enough one-on-ones. And even through all that, you know, if they can get out of the half without that pick six, they're down 7. You can regroup a little bit. Granted, you're not getting the ball because, as you said, they keep taking the ball first, which tactically I'm also not the biggest believer in. I don't really understand the upside to it. Like, I don't know. But it definitely, kind of watching that pick six, I was struck by the fact that you needed 6 things to go wrong for that to come into play. And they all did. And on the one hand, it's weird to call plays on the idea that 6 things might go wrong. But on the other hand, like, you know, someone just has to do their job a little more right to prevent something really catastrophic. Because, like, if you're playing Tennessee on the road, you cannot do that. The one thing you cannot do is let them get 2 scores ahead with getting the ball right after. Like, and it was ironic because they turn around and up until, you know, one of about 1 million ugly sacks, the drive after they go down, they were like moving the ball in those last seconds. You know, it's probably not going to be a touchdown, but you might be able to get a field goal without that sack. And if they were able to capture that energy a drive earlier, you know, maybe you're talking about a 17-13 game. But on the road getting it to 17-13, that's how you potentially win a game. And they did not.
So 3rd and 22, even if he catches that ball, Omega Blake, he's probably staying in bounds. He's immediately getting tackled. They're still calling timeout. You're still punting it. On 3rd and 22, I just think there was under 50 seconds to go. There would have literally been about 40 seconds to go by the time the Tennessee punt returner gets the ball. Maybe if Kroger punts it away from him, which he's capable of doing, and the ball rolls, you're under 40 seconds, and they only have one timeout instead of two because you ran the ball. Okay, they were only going to have one timeout anyway unless you ran out of bounds, right? Omega Blake, if he catches it, runs out of bounds. And so to me, I think there's no defense of the pass play call, because it's like Danny Ford used to say, when you throw, only three things can happen and two of them are bad. It could have been an incompletion. So then the clock stops immediately. You don't gain any yards and they have two timeouts, or they intercept it, or on 3rd and 22, you complete it underneath the defense. To me, they're playing back on defense to prevent a big play. You have a better chance of breaking an 8-10 yard run than you do of completing a long pass play. I just thought it was completely nonsensical. I thought it was a horrendous decision, and it completely broke the game wide open because Tennessee gets the ball to start the second half. And just like we've seen Clayton White's defense, points per allowed in the third quarter this year, South Carolina is number 120th out of 130 FBS programs. But North Carolina, Georgia, Mississippi State, everybody scored in the third quarter on South Carolina except maybe Furman.
Yeah. I mean, I think my only defense of the play call would basically be something like, if you have, because they had deeper routes, if things hold up, you check those deeper routes, then maybe you dump it off. It's basically the same as a run. Now, the problem is you've got a freshman left tackle, and that freshman left tackle got turnstiled. And he gets turnstiled, and Spencer Rattler's getting hit as he's thrown, and that sends the ball high, and all of a sudden you're in a world of hurt. I can see, I think that decision for me is almost like a coin flip, in the sense that, let's say you do hand it off. Let's say that their punt returner, who's pretty good, manages to make a little hay against, he almost returned a punt for a touchdown later in the game. You give that offense 40 seconds starting from the 45, then you might be a little worried. I get the logic on both sides. Either way, if you have 3 to 4 breakdowns, it's going to go sideways. And as you said, this road for this defense has been very strange, because it hasn't been exactly like any single element they've just been crushed in an individual game, except for maybe a lot of passing yards for Mississippi State, though not like bananas efficient. But you kind of look at every game, and it's not like they've been just flat steamrolled in any particular thing, but they've just been not good enough in 3 to 4 phases that you kind of look at the end and you're like, this overall performance is not good enough. It's been very odd to watch.
All right, so let's talk about the Mississippi State pass defense, okay? For whatever reason, look, hats off to Mississippi State, to Zach Arnett. They went away from their tendencies after being down 14-0. You probably do need to throw it. You do have one of the most prolific passing quarterbacks through 3 years in SEC history, in Will Rogers. You have LaDetrick Griffin, who is the number one target, and there may not be a quicker, faster combination in the league than him. And they scheme it up, and DQ Smith gets on him, and he beats him. which you would expect because DQ Smith is really a down in the box nickel, fifth defensive back or third linebacker type of guy. That's a complete mismatch for him. Granted, there was safety help. Nick Emanwari got caught coming up for the run with his eye, had his eye discipline, was in the wrong spot. But time after time after time, they never adjusted out of that. DQ Smith was on LaDietrich Griffin for the rest of the game. And he continually torched the defense, and there was no adjustments. I've seen every defensive coordinator from, Tyrone Nix to Ellis Johnson, Lorenzo Ward, Muschamp, and T-Rob. All those guys adjust out of that, and when they go to those kind of sets, they just switch the corner off onto that guy and give the safety the white guy because he's probably going to have flat coverage on that. And Clayton White never adjusted. And the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result.
Yeah. I mean, I honestly think even more than necessarily something like that, the biggest issue for this Gamecocks defense is it is not getting – this sounds simple, but it makes sense. They are not getting enough short plays. And by that, I'm, some of that sacks and tackles for loss, which they're obviously not getting enough of either. But they are not getting enough plays that set up good second and third downs. And sometimes when they do set up good second downs, then they burp and they give up 9 yards, and all of a sudden they've let up a good third down. Like there's some numbers out there that basically track, how often you force third and longs and how often you avoid third and shorts. And South Carolina is outside of the top 120 in those. Like, it's just this team. Shane Beamer even had kind of a good point on it that I'm going to write about it a little bit later this week, pointing out that, the thing that really kind of irked him was 3 long drives, 9 plays, 12 plays, 9 plays, where Tennessee marched down the field. And that, I think, has been the biggest issue, is that this team is letting opponents march down the field. And it's not, and they're also not being helped by the fact that sometimes you're a bend but don't break defense, but at least you're really, really good at not breaking. And this year's team is just average at not breaking. So, you're having people march, but you're not necessarily really making them march, if that makes any sense. And that is a very, that ability to march down the field and string together plays, that is one of the best indicators of your quality. If you're forcing 3 and outs on defense and you're able to string together long drives on offense, you're going to be awesome. And South Carolina's defense at the moment is really struggling to create anything close to 3 and outs.
Well, you had 1 sack, that was by Bam Martin Scott, and 0 tackles for loss. 0 negative yardage plays outside of that 1 sack for an entire game. Coming off the Mississippi State game where you had 4 sacks and 9 tackles for loss. And it wasn't like they were creating a lot of pressure beforehand. And here's the thing. South Carolina, they're not shy about blitzing and sending their linebackers. They do it way too much, and they end up getting gashed way too much. And even when the linebackers are in position to make plays, a lot of times they miss tackles, or they miss the guy and then have to chase him and tackle him 6 or 8 yards down the field. And I don't know if it's the scheme I mean, they're not creating pressure with the front four. That's for damn sure. So they feel like they have to send more people, but they're sending guys that simply can't get there because Stone Blanton and Debo Williams, they don't get there. And from what I see, they are in the wrong gaps way too many times. They take false steps. They can't make up for it. And even when they're in the right gaps, there's still too many missed tackles by them right at the point of attack.
I honestly wish I had more to add to that, but I kind of don't. Like the linebacker play has just been
abysmal,
uneven. It's not been good. Like, you know, there are flashes here and there, but the sort of consistency, the sort of you know, I think it's a Clayton Whiteism about, you know, get them on the ground. Like, get them on the ground, make them snap the ball again. These kind of things matter, and they've had trouble with that. And one thing I'll also say, just from watching the film, and I don't know how much of this is talent and how much of this is just kind of fire and want, but they have had just a not a good time rallying to the ball. Like, I remember there was a little bubble screen that Tennessee ran, maybe the Squirrel White, and, you know, 2 defensive backs got blocked off the space. 1 linebacker was late getting out there, and, you know, it ain't much of a route. It's a pretty small route and a couple of blocks, and it was like 12 yards. And that, I think, has been happening far too often. Just the defense has struggled to close down space. And, you know, against a team like Tennessee, that's a killer because all Tennessee does is find space with athletic kids. And, you know, if you can't close down that different and you know, don't stone a guy on a tackle, that's 7 extra yards right there. And that's a lot of yards, man.
Yeah, I mean, 2nd and 3 is a big difference from 2nd and 7. If you get off the block and make a play on a 3-yard route or a screen at the line of scrimmage, and you hit the guy for 1 or 2 yards, 2nd and 8, 2nd and 9 versus 2nd and 3, that's a huge difference. And, you know, South Carolina statistically, nationally, on 3rd down defense is 103rd. They've allowed more first downs than any other defense in the Southeastern Conference, and 117th nationally. You know, third down has not been good for them because the offenses are in 3rd and short, and even when they are in 3rd and long, I mean, I'd really like to see the statistic on the percentage of 3rd down conversions on 3rd down and more than 7, because I bet it's pretty high. Maybe outside the Mississippi State game or the Furman game. There have been a lot of conversions on 3rd down and more than 7.
If you give me about 8 seconds, I think I actually have some data on that. But yeah, it's it really, a lot of it does feel like a lot of the 1st and 2nd down problems are kind of those ones that drag you down. And yeah, like when you're not getting enough pressure, when you're you know, when you're not getting disruption from your defensive front, when you have to blitz your linebackers more and leave your guys in man coverage, that can cause, you know, that makes it really difficult because you don't have all those, you don't have, you know, what's the cliche, one hand washing the other? You know, both hands are trying to apply soap to themselves separately. And, you know, we've seen overall just kind of the issues with the production.
So is it do you think it's more personnel than scheme, a combination of the two? I kind of think it is a combination of the two, but we're in year 3, and you have this thing called the transfer portal that Clayton White is very weird about. And you only brought in one linebacker in the transfer portal. The year before, you turned down a guy that went into the transfer portal to come home to South Carolina. And Clayton White says, I don't want him. He goes back out of the transfer portal and started every game for Alabama at inside linebacker. Okay. Probably a guy good enough to do that would have been better than Brad Johnson was last year. You know, clearly, you know, you're losing guys, your own players to the portal. Birch and Gilbert Edmond, I think, are both better than anybody they brought in. I mean, you look at Tuizama, he didn't even make the trip to Tennessee. I don't understand that. And JT Gear has been injured. I mean, those were your big transfer portal additions. You made no portal additions in the secondary. And the one guy you did take at linebacker, Jaron Willis, was a young player who, as poor as the linebacker play is, he's not even on the dress list for road games. So, you know, he's making the decisions because he's the defensive coordinator. I mean, why didn't you go after Fentrell Cypress? Why is he at Florida State instead of South Carolina? You know, clearly you needed another corner because losing Anthony Rose, that was not a good situation. He would have probably been a starter, and you're depending on true freshmen as backups. And we hadn't seen Bakari Swain outside of Furman. We did see Judge Collier, who was in for spring ball against Mississippi State, and I thought he acquitted himself pretty well, but he only played 3 snaps against Tennessee. And I mean, to me, there's a lot of questions that Clayton White needs to answer for on defensive recruiting, why there hadn't been an emphasis on recruiting more linebackers, and why they have been so finicky in the transfer portal. Because in year 3, you shouldn't have the normal slippage that you would have way back in the day when a lot of your best players were the players your former coach recruited. Outside of Spencer Rattler and Juice Wells, that's still been the case for Shane Beamer, okay, at South Carolina. Nick Eamon-Warren, DQ Smith, certainly on defense are exceptions to that. And then a lot of those guys, they graduate after the second year, and then you are stuck with young players. And you see that on the offensive line. Shane Beamer's, the bridge class from Muschamp to Beamer netted 1 offensive lineman, John Darius Morgan, who's yet to play. And then Beamer's first class was Grayson Maines, Cason Henry, and Ryan Brubaker. Henry would have probably been a contributor, but he, along with Jalen Nichols, injured. Brubaker, who would not have played, injured. And clearly, other than Nick Gargiulo, they didn't bring in the right guys on the offensive line out of the transfer portal either, which is, granted, is much harder to get offensive tackles out of the transfer portal. They're kind of like unicorns. And so, but it's still year 3. And with Spencer Rattler and Juice Wells coming back, there were high expectations. And through the first 5 games, this team has not met them. And then you have the Juice Wells situation, which just adds insult to injury.
I'd agree. And I mean, a name you didn't mention that obviously, like, it's weird to argue, how much insurance you would have wanted for him, but obviously Mo Kaba with the knee thing, always an issue, always a question. If he's healthy, your linebacker room looks, I don't know if necessarily worlds better, but definitely feels a lot better because I think Mo Kaba is a very competent SEC linebacker. But yeah, like they just, right now you've got a 4-star, a sort of sturdy, solid player, and then you've got another 4-star behind them who definitely looks like a freshman at this point. And it's tough because there's just, I think to a degree, the older I've gotten, the more I've realized that like depth on any football team is almost never really there. Like the moments you get depth, those are special. But even then, like, one of the 2 starters right now still probably would have been a top line guy, even if Mo Kaba was here. So that's definitely an issue. And on the one hand, I get that recruiting is hard, but it's not necessarily like, it's not like this team lost contributors in the back 7 to the portal. It's not necessarily, unless I'm forgetting someone, it's not like a linebacker who left or a defensive back who left and you're saying, oh, they would have helped today. Defensive end, absolutely. They lost 2 starters. Those guys would be starters. But yeah, I definitely think that's a thing. And I think it's weird to say. I also think a lot of these guys are capable of playing some degree of better than they have to this point. And I think some of that is a matter of them doing it. Like, if you remember last year with, the offensive fireworks at the end of the season, a lot of that was because some of those receivers who'd been playing up and down played up, played to their ability and balled out. And I think there's more to be had from some of these defensive players in terms of that. Will they get there? I can't say. This is college football. Everything is weird. But I think that's where it starts. Now, in terms of, I think you mentioned Drew Tuizama, and Shane Beamer was asked on Sunday about it. And he basically had a very flat, he wasn't in the travel plans. And I don't know exactly what that means, but I would assume sometimes people are 21 and have 21-year-old attitudes, and these things happen. And, they can get better at that. I don't know this. I'm just saying a lot of the time back when I was fully on the beat, if something seemed to miss, you would talk to someone and it would be like, they got to lock in seriously. So, I think the bye comes at the right time for this team because I still think there's a fair amount of ability that can be unlocked with the right button pushing, the right kick in the backsiding. And I just think it's a matter of that actually happening. I do also think 2 things. One, I do think some of the statistical stuff, maybe not where they're like all the way at the bottom, but I think some of the statistical stuff will flatten out a little bit just because South Carolina's played 4 good teams and most of them quite good. And a lot of other teams have played, no offense to Kentucky, but they've played like, a lot of Ball State and Eastern Kentucky type teams. And shoot, South Carolina's FCS team was even a good offensive FCS team. But so I think if they have some of those stats that are maybe closer to the 90s, those are going to start shifting up just because it normalizes a little bit. Also, that being said, South Carolina's schedule is brutal every year. And this year, just because UNC is good, is extra brutal. So that's part of life. And the last thing, actually, South Carolina on 3rd and long actually pretty average in how many times they give up a first down. Now, you'd like them to be better than average, but they're getting stops on about, looks like 75% of the time. So, but the problem is they don't have enough of those to really help the overall numbers.
So offensively, on the run game, South Carolina 14th in the SEC, averaging just 87 yards per game and a paltry 2.7 yards per rush attempt. Obviously, the DeCarrion Joyner experiment has not gone like they had hoped, but at the same time, I think a lot of it's due to the fact that you don't have Jalen Nichols, who would have been your left tackle. You don't have Casey Henry, and for whatever reason, the nutrition and strength and conditioning staff just sat there and watched Tyshawn Wanamaker wither away down to 255 pounds because him and his girlfriend decided they liked how he looked at that weight. And certainly Sidney Fugar and Jackson Hughes have not been the answer at offensive tackle. I don't think Casey Henry's coming back. Certainly Jalen Nichols is not coming back this season. And so do you think about putting Ja'Kai Moore back at left guard and moving Nick Gargiulo out to right tackle and just living with Tree Babalade at left tackle? Or do you just go with two true freshmen and keep Gargiulo inside and just keep a revolving door at right tackle?
Honestly, in terms of the tackle situation, and this is a situation that I'm sure he's going to satisfy zero people, I honestly might just stick with Wanamaker in the sense that, like, it always seems like Tyshawn Wanamaker is sort of this tackle of last resort. You try a bunch of guys who have maybe a higher ceiling, and then you sort of settle with him as like a passable floor. Now, that floor hasn't been good, but it's been better than a lot of the other stuff. I might try Ja'Kai Moore at tackle again. Not a great to see your face. Not a great answer. But there aren't a lot of good answers because Nick Gargiulo is a center and a guard, and he had a rough day against Tennessee, and I don't know if he's any better out at tackle. So my answer might be Tyshawn Wanamaker, not because I think Tyshawn Wanamaker is a solution, but only because I think he is the least bit of a problem at that position. And it's tough because, like, as you kind of said, he's lost a lot of weight, and if it is for that reason that you said, that's very weird. And like, he's never been great, but he's at least been able to plug the hole passably in a couple of seasons. And even if he's worse, he might have to do that again. In terms of the running game, honestly, this is, some of this might be tricky with snap counts, keeping people fresh physically and tipping plays. But to be perfectly honest at this point, if I am the coach, I am making sure I'm funneling as many carries as I can to Mario Anderson, because he seems like the best back. And if I have DeCarrion Joyner in there, I'm throwing a lot more and trusting that he can pass block and receive to whatever level I need him to. And I'm designing some gadget plays for Juju and not a ton else. And I'm throwing the ball a lot more. Like, that's just where it is. And you'd like to be something different, but at the moment, like it's just been rough for those top two running backs to start the season. I mean, the top two guys in your depth chart right now are averaging 2.2 yards a carry. That's just the offensive line isn't helping, but even with a bad offensive line, that number should be a little less awful. And right now it's not. And I don't know. And it's interesting because on the one hand, Spencer Rattler is helping the run game with his scrambles, but his sacks are also hurting it statistically. So, and if you were Will Muschamp, and hell, probably if you're Shane Beamer, those don't count for your run game anyway, but probably some of the screens do, and they've at least made hay on those. But yeah, like in terms of your traditional handed off run game, I'm funneling everything I got through Mario Anderson, and I'm throwing more. And I'm letting DeCarrion Joyner help with the throw games. There aren't that many chess moves left. It's a part of that feels a little like 2019 when the offensive line was super young and kind of a mess pass blocking. And they basically just said, there's one run concept we run pretty well, so we're just going to run the ever-loving hell out of it. And it didn't produce a great outcome, but it produced some passable stuff and some useful games. And, unless they've got something real deep in the back pocket, they might just have to go ahead and run what they got.
So what are your thoughts about, one, I think you've got to get DJ Braswell ready for some kind of role in the run game, because to me, he's clearly the most explosive back, even though I was impressed with Mario Anderson on that long run.
That was nice.
And I kind of like Juju McDowell as a replacement, kind of rolling in with Amarian Brown in the slot, because I think he can do damage in the screen game, and I'd like to see what he could do in the vertical passing game as well. But I think he's probably quicker than he is fast, and I think he could help you out in space in the screen game if you can get perimeter blocking, which is not really been all that good to start the season as well.
I think I would agree with that. I haven't talked to anyone in the building about how DJ Braswell has kind of looked in practice, how he's kind of adapted. Based on his playing time, I would assume that he has struggled with some of the transition to high school or to college, but I don't know. I mean, if he's popping enough and he's looking good enough in practice, at the very least, you want to get him mentally ready to potentially go in. And yeah, with Juju, like at this point with this offensive line, yeah, you've just got to figure out gadget plays for him, swing plays, even if it's one of those situations where they line up with two running backs and it's inside zone with one running back and he's running that little swing screen on the RPO. That might be what you have to do, just in terms of like, I mean, he just maybe he could be a decent inside zone running back with a good offensive line, but he's not blessed with that right now, and he's not busting through tackles, and tacklers are getting on him way too fast on the few carries he's getting, and that kind of is what it is. Like, that's one where you're going to have to find different uses from. I don't know how much special teams. I think he's somewhat of a special teams guy, but maybe you turn up that role and see if that frees up anyone else. Because in general, like, I think he's a nice asset to have, but he isn't gonna. It's becoming clearer and clearer that like the chance of him stepping into that kind of role as a key tailback is just less and less at this point.
I agree. So, the hope is for Juice Wells to come back. He may still be, it may be after Florida before you get him back. And so, I think Omega Blake has been serviceable, but to me, they've got to really develop the young receivers. Nicholas Harbor, outside of Furman, I don't think he's had any receptions. Tyshawn Russell has had a few. The one guy you heard about all summer and into fall camp was Elijah Caldwell. And clearly there has to be some kind of injury or something that Shane Beamer is not mentioning on him. And so, because teams are going to start game planning to take away Xavier Legette like Tennessee did. And without a guy like Juice Wells, who was waiting last year for the second guy to show up, and for there to not be, 120 plays and 18 personnel groupings so they could throw the ball vertically instead of horizontal to the line of scrimmage. I mean, what can Dowell Loggins do? I mean, I'd like to see more Joshua Simon along with Trey Knox. I don't agree with Jordan Rogers often, but I do think you have to use more 7 and 8 man protections, and at times even a 9-man protection, and just take a shot on one side of the field. And I don't think we've really seen that. And I know you've broken down all the film. I mean, what was the success rate for South Carolina when they were in empty 5 wide against Tennessee? To me, it was awful, and I couldn't understand why they kept going back to it.
I didn't track necessarily that specific stat, but I don't think it was very good, especially because a lot of empty is going to be bubble stuff anyway, going to be get the ball out quick. And South Carolina was just kind of miserable in the get the ball out quick game in that game. In terms of verticality, I do think that there's probably some more room for, getting the ball out, just dialing up some of those shot plays, pulling up some quick stats. It looks like they're a decent bit below average in terms of deep passing. And a lot of those passes have sort of been your, outside streak plays to necessarily someone like Xavier Legette. But yeah, it's actually interesting. I know we do not speak of Dowell Loggins' predecessor, but there were a smattering of, in my opinion, pretty good 2-man deep max protects concepts. Usually it would be either like an over route under a post, or they would have one where it was like it looked like it was about to be an over route under a post, and then it would break into a post corner, and you got kind of a nice high-low look, and then usually you'd block heavy, and then one of the blockers would kind of sneak out if you needed a dump off. Without all 22, I can't tell a ton about the kind of vertical stuff they do, how much forwards they're running, how much they're actually getting out of it. Obviously, a lot of the problem there is you need protection, and you need tackle protection. And a lot of this team's best deep game stuff comes when Spencer Rattler can break the pocket cleanly and then get out and make something happen. And one topic that kind of came up against Tennessee was a smattering of struggles in terms of breaking the pocket cleanly. He had a couple of spaces where it looked like there was one where there was like a nice crack for him to run through, and both guys just got off their block and jumped him. There was another where someone threw an offensive lineman into his path, and he just ran into his back and then kind of climbed up it. It was odd looking. But yeah, a lot of that is sort of contributing there as well. But in terms of receivers, I think honestly, I think Russell's coming along, so I think that could be interesting. I think you're going to need more Omega Blake coming along. I think you're going to need more Marion Brown being healthy. And I don't know what exactly off the field or in practice is keeping Eddie Lewis from getting snaps, but he's got to fix that because, I mean, he's pretty decent. I don't know if he's great, but I think if Brown and Wells are out, he's probably your second highest floor receiver. And you just gotta get out there. I don't know how.
One rep against Tennessee. I didn't understand that. Obviously, we're not at practice. I mean, so go back to the Clemson game. You had the design rollout with the high-low with Juice Wells on the post corner, and you had the out route on the radio replay. Tommy Suggs, the low guy, was wide, freaking open. He thought it was going to throw it to him. Rattler went over the top to Wells. Rattler is extremely accurate outside the pocket. I know Dow Loggins has to have a lot more common sense and understand offense better than the other guy. With the state of this offensive line, to me, I think you would have to go to more RPO or design bootlegs, rollouts where you do have a high-low and maybe a dump off or a backside guy to where it's a three-man route on a naked or a bootleg or a design rollout where you move the pocket to give Rattler more of a clean look, because historically he's been extremely accurate when he's outside the pocket, and we just don't really see very many of those being called.
Yeah, it definitely feels like moving the pocket to one degree or another has kind of, I think in the spread era, and especially with all the screen game stuff, I feel like some of that stuff has kind of gone a little out of style. But I also think it's not the worst to get Rattler in that kind of stuff, especially, a lot of, at least some people theorize that a lot of what they do is half field reads anyway. So if you roll extra half field, fine. So I'll be interested to see if they maybe work some of that in just to relieve the pressure. Now, the downside is that, if you're a right-handed quarterback, you're going to be rolling right a lot, and that's going to mean DeCarrion Joyner and Tyshawn Wanamaker and maybe one of those tight ends are the tip of the spear in blocking right in that key space. And I could potentially see a coaching staff saying that might be a little dicey of a proposition. But, still, my assumption is most coaching staffs, especially with the ups and downs thus far, go into the bye week with a lot on the table.
I mean, there's no doubt South Carolina, has played 3 top 25 opponents. Unfortunately, they are 0-3 in those games. You were a 3-point game with the ball in the fourth quarter in Athens. You couldn't get anything going against North Carolina in the third quarter after the Amari and Brown drop. We hadn't seen Keenan Nelson since that game, I don't think. It's not good.
Nope.
So I do think there have been some bright spots like TJ Sanders, obviously, Jalen Kilgore. Babalade, prior to Tennessee, had been really good on pass blocking. And Trevon Ball has flashed at times. Both of those guys have high ceilings. I think you just have to roll with them. coach them up. I don't know what Nick Harbor's role is, but to me, if you run that guy on go routes at least 5 or 6 times per game, he ought to be running past somebody. And if not, there ought to be a lot of space underneath the area that he vacated. And you do have Florida coming to Williams-Brice Stadium with an extra week to prepare, and Sunbelt Billy 1-7 away from the swamp. And they are coming off a major, they took behind the Big Blue woodshed, and they got their asses wore out with a Big Blue 2x4 in Lexington on Saturday afternoon. And so that, Kentucky just lined up and ran the ball right down their throats, and they had no answer for that.
Yeah, I think with the Harbor stuff, I'm always a little wary because I get that he's big and tall, but like my assumption is if he was ready to be really that level of playmaker, I just have to imagine he'd be doing it more. Like if his impact, if you couldn't cover him one-on-one, a part of me thinks that, but I don't know. In terms of Florida, I think that the back end, what is potentially helpful for South Carolina is that the middle of the SEC, really a lot of the SEC, is a lot more mid than it has been. Even Tennessee was that way. Tennessee last year was a force, and Tennessee the year before felt really dangerous. And this year's Tennessee feels a little more up and down. And it's part of the reason I think South Carolina fans are really mad about losing the game, because you could say, did Tennessee play so well as to completely own that game? Not really. They played well, but South Carolina did not play well enough in terms of being crisp and clean, and also just, as we kind of talked about, the little stuff. But, you look at it Florida has been real weird up and down. Kentucky looked kind of ragged and didn't play when they weren't playing anyone, though that's kind of a theme for them. And they look good as long as Davis is killing it. But Leary's been fine. The defense is actually pretty good now. Texas A&M in some ways has looked extremely fearsome, but they also have Max Johnson. So it's a little dicey. Missouri. They don't look necessarily like world beaters just yet. They have maybe one of the best wins the SEC has against Kansas State, but it's not like they're, the best thing you can say is that Brady Cook is a dual threat quarterback who's killing it as a passer, which feels a little not unsustainable, but a little, not necessarily Spencer Rattler killing it all the time. And you just kind of count down the teams, and there's vulnerability there. Now, does South Carolina have to take 2 steps forward? Yeah, it does. But it's not like the past where you would have top level Georgia and top level Clemson and 9-4 Texas A&M and good Dan Mullen Florida the rest of the way. Almost all these teams have some sort of weird Achilles heel. So, it's on a team to improve, but it's not impossible right there.
I agree. And then you do, in addition to what my friend Josh Pate called Cocktober coming up, you do have Florida. Then you have at Missouri, at A&M, and then you're into November, where you do not leave the friendly confines of Williams-Brice Stadium all month long, with Jacksonville State, Vanderbilt, Kentucky, and Clemson. And you have to think by November, your younger players that are playing a lot of football right now really shouldn't be playing like inexperienced freshmen at that point. And so it may be another one of these weird seasons to where, it comes down to November again, and Shane Beamer does what Shane Beamer has been able to do the first 2 years and get to a bowl game. I mean, if you beat Florida, which you should, you need 3 more wins, and one of those is Jacksonville State. So then essentially you need 2 more wins. Vanderbilt should be 1. That's 5.
Mm-hmm.
That you only need 2 more wins to get to 7. And to me, that could be doable, but it's also up in the air as to, what will happen. So I still think there's a lot of football to be played. Clayton White has a chance to change my mind. I think if the season ended today, you have to make a change at defensive coordinator. You need somebody with a fresh perspective on the transfer portal and somebody that, is better scheme-wise and just depending on turnovers to help you win games. If South Carolina's not getting turnovers and, the first 2 years, if you got to the second half, Clayton White was making those great adjustments. This year, that has not been the case in the third quarter. South Carolina has been abysmal defensively in the second half, and in particular in the third quarter of games. Something's got to change there.
Yeah, I mean, if the production is where it is, I think that usually leads you to the decision that makes sense.
All right. Well, hey, Ben, great stuff. I can't thank you enough for being with us. Tell us what you've got coming up on thebigspur.com for the bye week. And then are you already peeking ahead and looking at that Sunbelt Billy offense and Gator defense?
Well, I'm not 100% sure what's coming up for the Big Spur. I need to touch base with someone there. Usually I do some kind of catch up. That'll probably happen, but I got to figure that out. Beyond that, I have already done most of my scouting and some of my writing about Florida. If you would like to see a lot of short passing and a lot of not trying to convert third downs, I got a team for you. Other than that, I'm chipping in a little bit at the state to help out with some stuff. So I'll have maybe 3-4 articles with them. So yeah, just staying around, staying busy, I suppose.
So Graham Mertz, a guy that well as a team that you follow, the Wisconsin Badgers. I really found that an odd fit to begin with when he went to Florida. What's been your take from your film study?
So it's been interesting. He's clearly, to a degree, playing what I would call cleaner. Like he always had habits of sort of being jittery and kind of spraying balls. He's doing a little bit less of that. Like there were some plays, I think, against Tennessee where I was like, I don't think I watched a lot of Wisconsin football. I don't think I've seen him make plays that crisp and tough, 2 or 3 of them in a game a lot of the time. That being said, Billy Napier has done a very interesting choice, which is he has really reduced what that offense is asking him to do. Like they are so low in terms of air yards per pass attempt. They are so high in terms of throwing the ball behind the line of scrimmage. Like it's kind of crazy to watch because almost every play there's a running back, or often the receiver, I think it's Ricky Purcell, is just in the flat waiting in case everything else breaks down. And they really haven't a lot, and sometimes they do, but a lot of the time they will turn down the opportunity on 3rd and 11 to just drop back and let him do something, and they'll just run the ball, or they'll just run a screen. And I've rarely seen an offense so much take responsibility out of a quarterback's hands. And, it's worked out somewhat well because he's completing like 80% of his passes. It's bananas. But it's been interesting to watch someone build an offense so much around limiting the quarterback. But it seems to be working well enough for them for now. So, let it happen, I suppose.
All right. Well, hey, Ben, great stuff. Thanks for being with us. Enjoy the rest of your trip, and we'll look forward to catching up with you down the road.
All right. Thanks for having me.
All right. And I'll be right back after this commercial message.
If you enjoy listening and watching the Free Wednesday show, now live streaming on YouTube, and would love more Gamecock Pod daily, join our growing Gamecock family by becoming a monthly or annual subscriber. You'll be able to listen to the show every day of the week and listen to guests like J.C. Sherbert, Hale McGranahan, and John Whittle from thebigspur.com, Colin Taylor and Mike Yuva from Gamecock Central, Emily Adams from the Greenville News, Ben Portnoy, Michael Lanana, and Jeremiah Holloway from GoGamecocks.com, Michael W. Bratton, the host of That SEC podcast, and many, many more. As a VIP subscriber, you can join or listen to the weekly live Zoom call with up to 100 of your favorite Gamecocks and friends. After the show is an unrecorded overtime segment where the real scoop gets dropped and discussed. It's like going down to your local pub or sports bar and having a conversation with your Gamecock friends about last week's football game, men's and women's basketball games, and Gamecock baseball. And of course, there's always recruiting to discuss. In addition to the weekly Zoom call, VIP subscribers get the most popular podcast, The Morning After, which is released every Sunday morning during football season, and more VIP perks are in the works. Follow Keith on Twitter @KAllset, or follow the show on Twitter @GamecockPod. Go to the top of the homepage and follow the link. If all else fails, go to patreon.com/GamecockPodDaily. Join now and get up to 3 months free off an annual VIP subscription. You will love it, guaranteed. Now, back to Gamecock Pod Live.
All right, great stuff there from our good friend Ben Breiner, breaking down the Gamecocks. So some notes, some more Nana Sports news notes and headlines to end the show, brought to you by Nana's Porch, an award-winning full-service catering company servicing the greater Charlotte, North Carolina area. Whatever your catering needs may be, whether it is a banquet, a wedding, a corporate event, a big backyard bash with the whole hog barbecue to welcome in some cooler weather, which should be coming very, very soon and coming next week here to Central Texas. Nana's Porch has got you covered. You need a food trailer, Nana's Porch should be your go-to there. Voted among the top 3 according to the local newspaper poll there in Charlotte, and their award-winning pimento cheese finished both number 1 and number 2 in the meat and cheese category by the North Carolina Specialty Foods Association, with my personal favorite, smoky jalapeno, coming in at number 1, and the great regular flavor also, which my wife and daughter enjoy more, coming in at number 2. So here we go. So the NCAA is shrinking the transfer portal for all sports from 60 days to 45 days. You will get for football, a 30-day period. They're still meeting and deciding, but it will be 30 days after the end of the regular season. So that should start sometime in early to mid-December and run through January, and then a 15-day period from April 15th to April 30th, and that will be it. I think all coaches are in favor of that. And so we'll see what the final outcome is after the meeting concludes and they wrap a bow and dot all the I's and cross all the T's there. Congratulations to Gamecock running back target Daniel Hill from Meridian, Mississippi, being named to the Alabama-Mississippi All-Star game. Still think the Gamecocks are in good shape there along with Alabama. Think Tennessee is third. It's just going to be a battle of wills between his dad and the rest of his family there. Spencer Rattler named today, according to our good friend Chandler Mack, one of 25 candidates for the Johnny Unitas Golden Arm Award. Rattler, number 1 in the SEC in completion percentage, number 13 nationally, and number 20 nationally in passing yards per game. And certainly that he'll have a lot better shot in this back half of the season. Really held down against Tennessee, but I don't expect that to be the case for all the rest of the season. And at halftime of the November 4th home game against the Jacksonville State Gamecocks and Rich Rod, little Gamecock on Gamecock crime, November the 4th at halftime, the head ball coach, Steve Spurrier, will be honored along with his teams from 2010 to 2013, the greatest 4-year stretch in school history, where the Gamecocks won 42 games in 4 years. And the head ball coach will address the crowd at halftime. So that should be entertaining as well. Looking forward to that. This Florida game is really huge. I mean, you hate for game 6 to be really big, but with road games against Missouri and Texas A&M coming up in October, before you finish out the year with 4 straight home games, all of which, by the way, are winnable, including Kentucky and Clemson to end the year, Gamecocks need to make some noise. I would expect a potential shift on the offensive line. We'll see if that develops, but Clayton White and the defense have got to get better. And so those are your Nana's Porch news, notes, and headlines. Check them out at nanasporch.com. This is a Gamecock-owned and operated business. Get in touch with my good friend Chris Payne, who chimed in the Nana's Porch chat box earlier. And so that is going to be a wrap for me today. Special thanks to Ben Breiner for his contributions, and to all of you who watch live and listen and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Give us sign up, subscribe, rank us 5 stars, and spread the good word. I'll be back on Friday. No podcast tomorrow with the open date, but we will be back on Friday to end the week. So this is Keith Allsett signing off and saying, go Gamecocks. God bless all of you. God bless America, and God protect our troops. I'm out of here.